Yeah, and then kind of flipping the page now to high school stuff. Uh, Obviously, this will be out on Wednesday, so you guys will have seen our Power 25 update. But we went through this morning, talked through it, made some changes, but I don't know if there was too much difference. But I mean, Def, if you want to, or anybody really, get in here and add some nuggets if you want.
No, I can take us through it again. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. There's really not a ton of changes. I think we added, what, four teams last week to the Power 25. This week, I think we only added two. So I felt like everybody really had good weeks, honestly. Some teams just had huge weeks, and we had to, make the proper adjustments. But right off the start, new number one again this week. It is now Lincoln Way West. They are 8-0. Had a 4-0 week. They just continue to dominate, it seems. They went, like Drew said, they went down to Lake Point. They played really well down there. We probably buried the lead a little bit, but Connor Essenberg had a huge week down there. It felt like every day Ian Smith was tweeting out him hitting a bomb. So like we said, there's a big matchup between them and Lincoln Way East next week. But moving on down, Brother Rice jumping 2 spots up to number 5. Maybe the most impressive team last week overall, if you really look at it. Like, they went 3-0, had 2 wins over two top 4 teams in Kentucky, including the number 1 team in Kentucky, Trinity. And then they also beat Saint Xavier. Next up, Hampshire jumping 3 spots up to number 10, 11-0. They went 3-0 last week with a win over a top 15 team in Kentucky. And also, like, speaking of big matchups, they play McHenry starting this week. If the weather holds up, they're supposed to have that series this week. Drew, I see you're unmuted. Feel free to hop in.
No, I mean, we're going down. First off, it's tough looking through these teams. Like, when we get on these calls and go through, like, you want to look at who they played, and these spring trips make it even tougher because they're going down and playing Kentucky teams. You know, you mentioned Brother Rice took out two of the best teams in Kentucky, but Lincoln Way West is going down to Lake Point. They're playing teams from Ohio, Georgia. Um, we've got a lot of looks at Lincoln Way West in the past. We know what they have. So seeing what they're doing, seeing that they're hitting, seeing that they're getting the pitching that we came to expect, them at 8-0, like, I think they're a pretty good choice there for number one. And it's always hard to move in Edwardsville off of number one when we've seen them play, and like the eye test it's a wow. You look at how deep they are, how many arms they have, the lineup that they throw out there, and the variety of lineups that they can throw out there. So, they're 7-2. They went 1-1 on the week to go to number two. Providence Catholic just won the WJOL tournament. So they're sitting there at number 3, but they were our preseason number 1. Like, we love that club. And a lot of these teams have like variety of games that they've played, just the sheer amount. You've got Provi at 5-1. They've played 6 games, and you've got Nazareth at 11-0. They've played 11 games. So then kind of just figuring out how to slot these teams is never easy. But most of the teams, like you said, Tyler, had good weeks. They made it fairly easy for us. Pretty much every team that went undefeated either climbed or stayed at the spot that they were at. Brother Rice, you mentioned them. I'm pretty sure they came back late against Lincoln Way Central. They were down big and ended up walking them off. But they're a team that we've also seen with the eye test. I know Pete saw them when Brady Cunningham was on the mound, and just the amount of talent that they have there. So now they're a top 5 team in the state. But, I'm jumping around a little bit here, Tyler, and you were going through it, kind of just the teams that were rising, and Hampshire's, a team that's kind of been on our radar since the offseason. And to see that they've started 11-0 and they're in that daunted Fox Valley Conference, and I think a lot is going to get sorted out in that conference. Teams will beat up on each other. So then, looking at when Hampshire plays McHenry, if they go 1-1 on the week, or 2-0, or 0-2, like, how much do you really bang a team when they're playing, another really good team? So, I just think there's a lot of noteworthy stuff throughout this Power 25. I think the other team that made a move, Mascuda, like we just talked about Edwardsville, they actually knocked off Edwardsville 10-0. And one thing we look at there is like, wow, okay, Mascuda played 1 game on the week, and they went 1-0, and they beat our number 1 team. They were at 14th in the state, Mascuda was. They're 4-1 now with that 1-0. They climbed 2 spots. But how much weight do you put on that? Because we looked into that game, and Mascuda throws Austin Muzo, their number one of the best arms in the state, and then they piggybacked him with Darren Klein, their number two arm, who's one of the better 2027 arms down there in Southern Illinois. So do you really bang Edwardsville a ton? Who played 2 games on the week. Their other win was a 13-1 win against Sacred Heart Griffin, and then they're facing Mascuda's best arms. So very, very hard trying to figure out like where exactly to slot these teams. But a great win nonetheless from Mascuda. Going over there, taking down Edwardsville, like that's a huge win, and we've liked Mascuda. We got our eyes on them as well. And then the team that I think is one of the more intriguing, just interesting storylines so far early on this spring is DeKalb, sitting at 10-0, and we were looking at their wins. Like they've got good wins on here. I know this past week they only played 2 games and none of them were ranked, but they beat a ranked Morris team 10-5, and they beat McHenry 5-3. We think very highly of McHenry. McHenry only has 1 loss on the season. So DeKalb just continuing to trend up there at number 13, up 3 spots. But Tyler, you keep moving through the list as well. I'm going to just keep kind of anything I see interesting on here, but I know Father McGivney was kind of next up, moving up the list.
Yeah, they also jumped 2 spots up to number 15. They're 9-2. They had a 2-0 week last week, and another team that just seems to be like beating whoever they play convincingly. They played Althoff Catholic last week, won both of those games by a wide margin. O'Fallon, I think another really interesting team. They jump up 4 spots up to number 16. They're 7-1. 2-0 week, and they also beat DeSmet Jesuit over there in Missouri, which is always a really good program out there. So 2-0 week for O'Fallon last week. Andrew jumping 7 spots up to number 17. Another team that seems to just be banging offensively. 10-0.
Look at their scores. Yeah. Like breaking down their scores, they beat Mount Carmel 10-2, Richards 5-2, which actually like their offense had an off day that game. Because then they beat Romeoville 10-5 and 13-0, and then they've got wins like 12-0, 17-8, 15-7, 4-1. So that offense, like you're saying, it's blown me away just looking at their game scores.
Yeah, and I know we were talking about big matchups. Lincoln Way East also plays Andrew this week, so really, like they're not on this rundown, but we're gonna find out a lot about Lincoln Way East this week, playing Andrew, and then also playing Lincoln Way West next week. So just want to tease that matchup. I think they play today. Obviously, this podcast is gonna come out on Wednesday, but they play today, Monday, and then also Wednesday against Andrew if the weather holds up. So we'll see there.
And Andrew's at 17 now. They jumped 7 spots. And then behind them, like I'm looking at 2 teams that actually are dropping down our list a little bit. And it goes back to somewhat of what we talked about early on. Like St. Lawrence is down to number 20. They're 5-3. Lamont is 3-2-1, and they're now at 21 on our list. But both of those schools are schools that took spring trips. They're playing teams from down in Florida. They're playing teams that have maybe been outside for 2 months straight, playing 30 games under their belt. So it's always really, really tough looking at them. And they're both 2 clubs that I really like, especially when you start talking about like 3A and who are the top teams in 3A. Like I still really like Lawrence. I like Lamont. We've gotten an eye test. We saw Lawrence. We still need to get out and see Lamont. But tough to know what to do with them and their records. Like they haven't played as many games as some other teams, and they have a few more losses, but still believe in what they have on paper there. And then number 22 is a new face, Fremd. They're 6-0-1, and they had a 2-0 week. And I think what's really caught our eye with them, and there are a lot of teams to dig through that were outside of the Power 25, and it's, hey, who do we choose this week to jump in? We're looking at like, okay, who has quality wins, right? Like first off, obviously the record, like what stands out, who's won a ton of games, who's lost hardly any. And then who have they beat? And Fremd has some really, really quality wins on their list here. They're 6-0-1 overall. They're jumping in at 22. They went 2-0-1 on the week, but they beat Matea Valley 11-1, and then the biggest win was over New Trier. They beat New Trier 4-3, who we've seen New Trier, like we know what they have on their roster. Really like what New Trier has to offer, so like that's a really quality win for me. They tied Crystal Lake Central last week, I believe it was. And Crystal Lake Central won 3A State last year. They tied them 2-2. And that might have been this week as well. And then the week before that, they knocked off number 15 Huntley 5-3, and they beat Bartlett 13-4. So like they've got two Power 25 wins. Honestly, like talking about it, and they've beat Huntley. Like Huntley, we currently have slotted ahead of them. That's a whole nother hard discussion. It's like, well, where the heck do we slot Friend if we're bringing them in? I think we're gonna make them prove it a little bit. Like we ranked Huntley preseason because we really felt confident about Huntley, who they had. I know Fremd has knocked them off, but like let's see what Fremd can continue to do here. And if they continue to play well, they're going to continue to climb up that list or that board. And DePaul College Prep, Tyler, I don't know if you want to take us through them.
Yeah.
They're the second newcomer this week and the only other newcomer this week. Just two teams jumped in. So.
Yeah, DePaul College Prep hops in at number 24. Another team who's just off to an unreal start, 11-0, 4-0 week last week. They're in that Chicago Catholic League, and they've got talent there, right? They've got a guy like Addison Latko, Owen Rogg, Benny Espinosa, an uncommitted senior who I think everybody here is a big fan of. So they've got
Kurakawa, Quinn Roberts, Alexi Phillips. That's another thing that we did today. Like, we're looking at who they've beat. We're looking at, they're 11-0, so it's like, all right, let's also just make sure we really like their roster, the guys that they have. Do they have enough arms? Who have they played? All that stuff plays into it, in my opinion.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that. Next, Gavin, I think we're going to hop into some bubble teams here. And listen, I'm going to rattle some teams off, but to the group, if any of you guys have any other teams you really want to give a shout out to, feel free to hop in. But just going to roll through these here. These are teams that are off to awesome starts to the year and really have our attention through the first few weeks. But first up, Rolling Meadows. They are 10-0-1. Then we got Hersey, 7-0-1. Teutopolis, 8-1. Downers Grove North, 7-1. Mundelein, 7-1-1. Another Fox Valley team coming in here. Burlington Central's 5-0. Plainfield Central, 7-1. Coal City, 10-1. Pleasant Plains, I saw them down at Kickoff Classic. Think they're a really talented team, 7-0. And then Ottawa Marquette, 9-1. So just some teams to note, like I said, that are off to really good starts and teams that really have our attention right now.
And Coach Whalen's got Grays Lake Central at 6-1. They're always a tough squad up there. Sacred Heart Griffin, we got to see them. They're 8-2, and East Peoria 7-2 as well, with some good names on their roster. We could probably go on and on. There's a lot of teams to keep an eye on. There's some undefeated teams down here too, like a Putnam County of the world, Shelbyville, St. Beatty, Mantino. A couple years ago, Mantino had a really, really good club. And they're not scared to play people either. At least they haven't been in the past. Like, I love that York is 6-1. You lose Ryan Sloan, you lose a couple other guys, and it's like, man, all they seem to do is win. So they're a team we're probably gonna need to see. Like, make sure we're not missing the boat on them, and also just continue to see how they progress. But it's always good to have just good teams all throughout the state that we kind of put on our list. Like, hey, we need to cross-check these guys. Another one is, like, you may have mentioned them, but like Mount Zion. They're 4-0, and we talked about like who they have on them. Like, they got Sam Driscoll, they've got Andrew Tay, they've got Fox, another arm, a younger, I think he's 2027, but like the three very quality arms down there at Mount Zion. I expect them to win a ton of games. Normally, UHI's coming in at 4-1. So a lot of good stuff, and like I feel like we've seen a lot of teams and a lot of games already, but like there's so much more to see. There's so much more to unpack as we go.
Yeah, Drew, I love the Putnam County shout out there. You got the Tri-County Conference 8-0 and Ottawa Marquette's 9-1. Like, that could be a pretty good matchup to see when they match up in their conference play, especially with Marquette having Alec Novotny. He's an arm to get out and see uncommitted 2026 there. So no, that's good stuff from the alma mater of the Tri-County Conference.
There you go. And you may have mentioned these, Tyler, so if so, but Lyons Township, they're 5-1. I think they're super intriguing, with the arms they have led by Tucker King. Definitely a club to keep an eye on there, but along with like plenty others. I mean, Naperville North starting out the year 4-2. Let's go, keep it up over there, Huskies. So yeah, I think that's what I got on this Power 25 update, Gavin.